Hi, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Bible Talk with Dr. Steve. I'm Dr. Steve, and today we're going to continue our short series on Isaiah chapter 7 with the specific intention of offering a fuller understanding of verse 14, which again states, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Immanuel." In today's video, we will specifically look at the text of Isaiah 7 and answer the question, among others, in what way does verse 3 help us to understand verse 14 better? Now, before we get started, please grab a piece of paper and something to write with so later you can look up the passages we discuss. Also, thank you for all your comments. Please keep sending them in. And if you like the content of what I'm putting out, I really do appreciate you smashing the like button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, which will let you know each time I put out a new video. So, let's get started with Isaiah 7. Because we have already looked at the historical background of Isaiah 7, we understand what's going on in Isaiah chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. King Ahaz is freaking out because the kings of Aram and Israel are waging war against his kingdom of Judah. Verse 2 says that when it was reported to the house of David, that is, to King Ahaz, that the army of Aram was already in Ephraim, that is, in Israel, both Ahaz's heart and the hearts of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake with the wind. In other words, Ahaz and the people of Judah were freaking out. Also, we learned in our last video, King Ahaz was scared of these two kings because, as we see in verse 6, they are planning to execute him and install a puppet king into power. So, because he was scared, and before Isaiah showed up, Ahaz had offered the king of Assyria, a more powerful king than the kings of Aram and Israel, a bunch of silver from the temple to protect him from these two bad kings. Check out 2 Kings chapter 16 for more information. And then comes Isaiah chapter 7, verse 3. The Lord tells Isaiah to go and meet King Ahaz and bring his son, Shear-Yashuv, with him. Now think about that for a second. God sends the prophet Isaiah to meet with the king of Judah about a matter of national security, and he tells Isaiah to bring his kid with him to the meeting. Now, why would God do that? He had never done that before or since, so why this time? What is the purpose? See, it's questions like these that we don't necessarily think about asking, but turn out to have, in my estimation, a lot of significance. See, a Bible study always asks questions of the text. I mean, all the time. All the time. Really, all the time. Don't judge the questions as being significant. Let their answers and the insights dictate their significance. See, in Bible study, one needs first and foremost to cultivate a spirit of curiosity. Curiosity is always my best ally, I always say. So ask questions, lots of them. If you don't have any questions, slow down until you do. The biblical writers and editors always know more than we do, so interrogate them. I mean, that means to ask why. Why is this text presented in this way? Why is this particular verse phrased in the way it is and not in some other way? Why was this or that detail added? Why was some other detail left out? Ask why a lot. Questions almost always lead to discovering more interesting contours in the text than we might have first thought existed. Now, my questions when I arrived at verse 3 were, 1, why would God want Isaiah to bring his son with him to such a high-level meeting about national security? And 2, does the name Shear-Yashuv actually contribute to the message or meaning of the ongoing story? First, to grasp the unusualness of this situation, imagine you live in modern-day Israel, in Jerusalem. Your father is a high-level diplomat, and he is required to go speak with the Prime Minister of Israel about foreign policy regarding, let's say, Israel's relation with Iran. Now, imagine your father is commanded by his boss that he must bring his son with him. His son is not a diplomat. He has no apparent foreign policy expertise. In fact, the only thing we are told about the son is that his name, Sha'ar Yeshuv, means a remnant will return. That's all the information we have when we go into Isaiah chapter 7, verses 4 to 9. So, what happens in these verses? Well, the Lord tells Isaiah to tell Ahaz, take care, be calm, and do not become faint-hearted. In other words, stop freaking out. I, the Lord, have got this. These two kings who are threatening your life and the lives of your countrymen, consider them as two stubs of smoldering firebrands, like two bent sticks used to stir a fire. Their threats against you will not come to pass. And, in fact, within 65 years, the northern kingdom of Israel will no longer even be a people. In other words, trust me, Ahaz. Don't you see? A remnant will return. The name of Isaiah's son is actually very significant. Names are often used in the Bible as object lessons. Here, the name of Isaiah's son becomes an object lesson for a king who is facing both his overthrow and the death of his kingdom. With Sha'ar Yeshuv, Isaiah need only point to his son when trying to convince Ahaz that if he will trust the Lord and not the king of Assyria, Ahaz will not lose his entire kingdom, but a remnant will return. From this object lesson in verse 3, the reader can recognize that the Lord uses a child's name as a sign that King Ahaz ought to trust the Lord. Even though Judah may be attacked, King Ahaz can clearly see a remnant will return, and Judah will not be utterly destroyed. Then the Lord asks Ahaz, through the prophet Isaiah, to ask for a sign from the Lord to assure King Ahaz that Isaiah is a true prophet of God. However, Ahaz refuses because he says he will not test the Lord, which sounds pious, but it seems to upset Isaiah. And all that takes place in verses 10 to 13, which leads us to verses 14 to 16. Isaiah tells Ahaz, because you won't ask for a sign, Ahaz, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will be with child and will bear a son, and she will call his name Immanuel. But he will eat curds and honey, but before this boy knows enough to refuse evil and choose good, the land whose two kings you dread, that is, the land of Aram and the king of Aram, and the land of Israel and the king of Israel, will be forsaken. Immediately, verse 3 should come to mind, because here and now is the second child mentioned by name that serves as a sign to King Ahaz, encouraging him to trust the Lord. That's important. Both children, Sha'ar Yeshuv in verse 3 and Immanuel in verse 14, are signs given to King Ahaz that he is to trust the Lord. Now, Sha'ar Yeshuv was a visual sign given to Ahaz, which Ahaz could look on and see that he exists, and was standing next to his father in this moment. However, the second sign is different. Immanuel is not present in that moment. So what kind of sign is Immanuel? What is on the line with this second sign? Immanuel requires trust, which means Isaiah has to be telling the truth, because Immanuel is an object lesson that won't be realized for some time because he is yet to be born. But at some point, before this child Immanuel knows enough to distinguish between good and evil, I would argue sometime before his 13th birthday, these two bad kings, Pekah, the king of Israel, and Rezin, the king of Aram, will no longer pose a threat to King Ahaz of Judah. It is critical that Isaiah is successful in his prophetic intervention, because if Ahaz does not trust the Lord and becomes a vassal, a servant to the king of Assyria, then the future of the kingdom of Judah, the home of the tribe of Judah, Jesus' tribe, as well as the tribe of Benjamin, would be in jeopardy. So this sign that the Lord gave to King Ahaz is directly integral to the need to convince Ahaz to trust the Lord and not man. If this child Immanuel is not born for another 700 years, then what good is he as a sign to a nervous king whom Isaiah is trying to convince to trust him, to trust the Lord? Frankly, he would serve no purpose in convincing Ahaz to trust the Lord, because Ahaz would have long ago died. If Isaiah promised a sign that did not come true, which, if you are arguing Isaiah 7:14 is Jesus in the first instance, it didn't, then we have a big problem with Isaiah as a prophet. And this is where we'll leave it for today. Before you go, please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and please do subscribe. It helps my channel, and I really do appreciate it. Also, please feel free to leave any comments. I'm grateful for your feedback. In our next video, we will talk about 1, the impact and relevance of Deuteronomy 18 and Isaiah 8, what they have on an understanding of the prophesied child, Immanuel, in Isaiah 7:14. And 2, we will discuss the hugely negative impact that the claim that this prophecy refers to Jesus in the first instance has on Isaiah's ministry as a true prophet of God. Well, that does it for our second video in our 5 sessions long video series on Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, and Matthew chapter 1, verse 23. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Bible Talk with Dr. Steve. I'm Dr. Steve, and this has been Bible Talk with Dr. Steve.